What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. Today is January 17th, 2023, and today we're going over all the wildcard games, recapping all of them, giving you the keys for why each team won, what we saw in the games, everything. And joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. What's up?
What is up, everybody? January 17th, 2023, Wildcard weekend lived up to the billing. It was wild, no pun intended. 6 games, all fairly close. 2 of them sort of got out of hand, but the others were fairly close. Really fun football to watch. We have 4 great divisional matchups that I think will be great to break down later this week on another podcast, so be on the lookout for that. We'll also be talking about something else, whether that be coaching carousel or potentially some basketball along the way, so keep an eye out for that as well. But episode 143, I believe, Super Wildcard Weekend Recap. Thought I might do a little bit of prep for this episode, ended up not. I feel like for one of these recap episodes, it's better to just go raw and tell you what I saw, tell you what I think, and that's what we're going to do. So let's just get right into it.
Well, funny you say that, because I actually did get some prep done for this episode, which is strange for me considering my tendencies lately. But I was in class. There was like a night class. We weren't doing anything, so I was like, screw it, I'll do prep. But let's get started here. No reason to waste any more time. The first game on the docket is Seahawks at Niners. So go ahead and give us your thoughts real quick.
Well, it was an avalanche, sort of like I thought it would be in the second half. The 49ers ran the ball effectively. Seahawks really couldn't stop the run. They did a little bit better of a job in the first half. Geno Smith and the Seahawks did make some plays, particularly DK Metcalf in that first half. He was featured prominently in the offense. They were running the football a little bit better than I thought they would. And they did, make some plays. They were in the game at halftime, but they just couldn't sustain it. But the main thing I want to mention is like Brock Purdy, he was fine, but that was far from his best, far from what we've seen over the past month or so of the regular season when the Niners have been rolling. And so if that performance there is anywhere close to his floor and the Niners can still put up 30-plus points, they're going to be a tough out. I mean, I know he's a rookie. He's a 7th-round pick. He's Mr. Irrelevant. And we all had questions both about Geno Smith and Brock Purdy and how they would fare in a playoff-like environment. And it only gets tougher down the road here for the Niners as they have the Cowboys coming to town next week and they could potentially face the Eagles and whoever represents the AFC in the Super Bowl if they make it that far. But there were some missed throws. He ran himself into a couple sacks. There were a couple could have been interceptions that weren't, and that's something that you talked about when we did our preview episode last week. So my point is, like, if that's closer to his floor, because that wasn't his best game, and the Niners offense still operates at that level with guys making big plays, they're fully healthy. I mean, You look at how that Shanahan offense is structured. I mean, they have all the players they need to make that thing go. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is a running back / slot receiver. Kyle Juszczyk even is the fullback position and a tight end, basically. George Kittle is an elite athletic tight end that also is very good blocking in the run game. Deebo Samuel came back, and he's virtually like a running back and receiver all in one. I mean, he's an 1,000-yard receiver, and he could potentially be a 1,000-yard running back if he got a full season of carries, in my opinion. And Brandon Ayuk has really emerged as like a borderline wide receiver one, in my opinion, that can win in one-on-one situations. So they have, I mean, this Shanahan system, extends throughout the league. It's been around a couple of years. It's featured prominently throughout the NFL. Particularly, you see it with Miami in that Mike McDaniel offense. I mean, Mike McDaniel coached a while under the Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan. So, and you saw what that Miami offense was able to do with a third-string quarterback against Buffalo, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'm still on the 49ers train. They were my Super Bowl pick last week to represent the NFC. And if that's the worst that we see of Brock Purdy, which it could be, it could not be, then I think they're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of, agreeing with you on the Brock Purdy side of things. He definitely didn't play his best game. And that's kind of where I want to start from a Seahawks perspective. Um, they weren't really able to take advantage of that early part of the game where he was kind of off a little bit. I mean, the ball didn't really bounce their way. And it seemed like, Brock Purdy did a good job of, if he missed a throw, he made sure no one would catch it. But the Seahawks really needed one of those plays early in the game. That was one of the keys I had for them. They needed to force a couple of turnovers to stay within reach for the majority of the game. And they did a good job of limiting the big plays in the first half. And I think that's what led them to be able to get that lead to start the second half. But from there, it was really just a domination by the 49ers. I do want to say, though, DK Metcalf was able to win on the outside, and I really lend that to what the Seahawks were able to do on that offensive line. Geno was moving around well in the pocket, but also that tackle duo of Charles Cross and can't remember their other rookie tackle's name at the moment, but they were both able to hold up for most of the game. And it wasn't until their center got hurt and their backup center was in the game to where you really saw the pressure really start to attack Geno Smith. That's when that fumble happened that really changed the game. But prior to that, they really mitigated this 49ers pass rush. And from there, they were able to take advantage of those matchups on the outside. So that's the key to really beating the 49ers. You're not going to really shut down this offense with the amount of weapons they have, but you're going to have to go and win on the outside against this defense because there are opportunities to be had if your quarterback is able to put the ball on the money. And those were really high level throws as well. Most quarterbacks would have missed the throws that Geno made to DK Metcalf, but even so, the opportunities are there. It just all depends on whether the opposing offensive line holds up.
Yeah, and real fast before we move on to the next game, I don't want to sell anybody short because I know a lot of our listeners take the time to listen, and I don't want to, I want to make the best content. But from a Seattle perspective, I do have an 8 a.m. class tomorrow, so I'm not going to drag this on too long. From a Seattle perspective, and I was talking to my cousin who was on our Super Bowl breakdown episode last year. He's a big Seattle Seahawks fan. And, every fan is disappointed when their team loses and gets knocked out of the playoffs. And Seattle was elated to just be there. And I was telling him, look on the bright side from a Seattle perspective. you got a bunch of young players. I mean, you hit on basically every single one of your draft picks last year. You mentioned the 2 tackles, Abraham from Minnesota, the right tackle, and then Charles Cross, the left tackle. They're brilliant, and they're only going to get better, in my opinion. I think you got probably one of the better running backs in the league right now with Kenneth Walker III, and you have some depth at that position as well. And on the defensive side, you really bolstered your defense, not only through free agency, getting Uchenna Nwosu from the Chargers, who I think made some plays on Saturday, but also in that secondary with Tariq Woolen, who I think is a future all-pro in this league, and then also Kobe Bryant to a lesser extent. So you hit on a lot of your draft picks, and it was sort of a win-win for the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, you made the playoffs when nobody thought you would be anywhere near contention, and you also found a capable quarterback. I mean, you're not desperate to draft a quarterback in this upcoming draft because you now know you have a full season's worth sample size that Geno Smith is capable. And you have a top 5 pick and multiple picks afterwards. I think you have 2 seconds as well from Denver, which will be good picks to add to this team. So I think it's just, I know you lost, but I think looking on the bright side, there's a lot to look forward to for the Seattle Seahawks.
Definitely. Yeah, the future is bright for the Seahawks, 100%. But let's move on to the most interesting game of the weekend. Chargers at Jaguars. I'll start off with this one. I'll say this. I give Staley credit in his defensive game plan, especially early in the game. He wanted to really take advantage of the lack of physicality on the outside with these receivers. Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk. None of them are really overly physically imposing. So they really wanted to get up into their skin and play physical. And with it being playoff football, they were able to get away with a lot of contact, and that really played to their favor early in the game. A couple of those interceptions you could argue were pass interference, but I mean, it's playoff football. I think it's give or take. It's a bang bang play. At the same time, it did feel like outside of getting turnovers, they couldn't get off the field. It seemed like every other possession the Jaguars had where they didn't turn the ball over, the Chargers just kept on, giving up plays on third down, or just they just couldn't stop the run on early downs to where it would be third and short, or they just pick up the first down on first or second down. And when that happens, I mean, that's when a team can really move down the field with limited amount of play clock going off the clock. And when you have a 27-0 lead, you want to make the other team work for everything, and that's just not what happened. The fault really goes to the offense, and it's the offensive coordinator, the offensive philosophy, but it's also the personnel. I mentioned in the preview that the Chargers have a lack of speed at receiver, and that really showed up. They have a lackluster amount of players who can stretch the field down the field. When Miami dials up a play, when San Francisco dials up a play, they can stretch the field even with, guys with limited arm strength. You could argue, Brock Purdy has a good enough arm, but nonetheless, the point is when the Chargers dial something up, it's a little 7-yard pass to Keenan Allen. Like it's just not efficient enough, especially with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who has a cannon for an arm. It just doesn't do him justice. So the Chargers can move forward here. I think it doesn't fall on Justin Herbert just because they put a lot on him, especially with the fact that they couldn't run the football in the second half. I think they were a minus 5 yards running the football in the second half outside of a Justin Herbert scramble. So when you put that all together, I mean, the result makes sense.
Yeah, the place where I blame not only Staley but the coaching staff, whoever makes these decisions the most, was the fact that you had Mike Williams in basically a meaningless game in week 18, and he ends up. I know you can't predict injuries, but you do know that you run the risk of having these type things happen when you do make these decisions. And so whether it was Staley, I can't say that factually. I don't know. I'm sure he played a role in who plays and who doesn't play, or someone else in the front office. That to me is just sort of inexcusable. I mean, I think the Chargers win that game if they have Mike Williams. I think he's a difference maker for them offensively. Gives them a little bit more of a dimension down the field. Guy that can go up and make possession contested catches that can change games and win you football games. And I just think that really hurt them. I think a lot of the credit has to go to, and we can talk about the Chargers, blowing the game all we want, but a lot of the credit has to go to Doug Peterson and what he was able to do from a decision-making standpoint in game, and his adjustments at halftime, I think, is what really sparked this comeback by the Jacksonville Jaguars. They get the touchdown right before half to make it, I believe, 27-7. So instead of being down 4 possessions, you're down 3 possessions. You got a little momentum. And then a couple of those play designs in the second half to really get this Jacksonville offense going and, calm the nerves of Trevor Lawrence, if you will, as we saw him in the first half really struggle against the Chargers defense, and give the Chargers defense credit. They were brilliant, and he basically nailed every strategic move down the stretch in the game and made the proper adjustments to get this Jacksonville team on the right track and on its way to victory. I look at the deep touchdown to, I believe it was Zay Jones. They ran a particular play, and Benjamin Solak, who's a writer for The Ringer, breaks it down perfectly and diagrams it perfectly on his Twitter and on theringer.com. I encourage you to go look at it. But it was like a deep, I'm not sure what they call it, like a dig concept, a deep post. And they ran it perfectly because Doug Peterson knew the tendencies of the Chargers defense, and it was a play specifically designed to attack that particular coverage. I wish I could show you, but really can't. So go check that out on your own. And then obviously the play that comes to most people's minds is that 4th and 1 call on the last drive where they gave the ball to ETN on that sweep, like weird run play in the wishbone formation. And that really, worked out for them well. And nobody, thought that was going to be the play. But if you go back and watch the Jaguars Chargers game in week 3, they ran that basically exact same concept on a similar situation, like a short 4th and short, and it ended up going for a touchdown. Just brilliant decision making all the way through by Doug Peterson. I think that's where a lot of the credit has to be, you have to give a lot of the credit to, I think, one of the best coaches left in these playoffs. I mean, I think you have 3 of the 8 remaining coaches. 3 have won Super Bowls: Mike McCarthy, Andy Reid, and Doug Peterson. Those are the ones. I think he's one of the best in-game coaches that we have left in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I wanted to say was in the second half, the Chargers averaged 37 yards per drive. So it's not like they completely fell asleep on offense. It's not like they completely fell asleep at the wheel. They were moving the ball, but they weren't getting the ball down the field far enough to kick a field goal or to where they could translate it into any points. And that's just, I mean, it is what it is, but man, it's just, you can't make this. They can't make this up. I almost cursed there, but you can't make this stuff up, man. It's the Chargers.
Chargers are going to charge her. That's what people
Yeah.
have been saying the past couple days. But with that, we'll move on to a game that early on looked like it was going to be ugly, but then it turned. A couple turnovers, a couple plays here and there. And before you know it, I think the Miami Dolphins had a 24-20 lead, like early in the third quarter. To me, this really boiled down to what I think we've seen a lot from Buffalo over the last month or so of the season, last month and a half or so of the season. And it's just that on paper, I mean, and when they're at their best, they're definitely good enough to win a Super Bowl. And that's why I picked them in the preseason. But they have all the ingredients, right? But I do think that I don't know what it is, but I do think that Josh Allen, for whatever reason, has reverted back to some of his old tendencies. And to me, I think he had 3 turnovers plus 2 other fumbles that were luckily recovered by Buffalo and could have gone the other way. To me, he's just got to stop. Like, he's just got to stop. He's got to rein it in, or I think Buffalo is going to end up going home early. They don't really commit to the running game. And a lot of what I saw is Josh Allen. I mean, he did make some superhero plays. He does it every game. I mean, I think the first touchdown to Dawson Knox, where he rolled out to his right and sort of threaded the needle to where only Dawson Knox could catch it. There were a couple plays there that, I mean, that's why he's Josh Allen. But it's just like some of it is not Josh Allen like. And I don't think you can have 3 turnovers and survive Joe Burrow. I don't think you can have 2 or 3 turnovers and survive a Patrick Mahomes. And definitely not some of the teams on the NFC side whose defenses will take advantage of that. More so than the Miami defense did. But I think you got to give credit where credit is due. What Mike McDaniels was able to do, scheme up some things. I mean, Skylar Thompson, young guy, throw him into the fire on the road in Buffalo, where, quite frankly, they do not lose playoff games in Buffalo. I think they're 13 or 14-1 in their history at home in the playoffs in Buffalo. And the only loss was like back in the 1990s. So I think that was a gutsy performance by Miami. Some of the things they did defensively did help to make Josh Allen, to force him into some of those decisions. But to me, it all boils down to the future of this Buffalo team and what it holds not only next week against Cincinnati, but if they want to win a Super Bowl, they can't have Josh Allen making these mistakes. And you got to have a little bit more of a consistent commitment to the running game. But this offensive line also worries me a bit because they haven't been the best. Let's just say that. So Buffalo's they're just a really interesting team to me right now.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is this really solidifies Mike McDaniel. Like what we saw from him throughout the season. He kind of went into this game kind of tentatively just picking the Bills to win big because of the lack of experience at quarterback with Skylar Thompson, as well as the Bills. They're a contender, but Mike McDaniel came in with a game plan. He knew the strengths of his young quarterback, Skylar Thompson, and you got to give credit to Skylar as well. He made the throws. Even a few of them early that were just dropped that would have really changed this game a little bit. I think that one throw to Waddle early in the game had a chance to be a touchdown if he just caught that and kept running. I mean, it would have been tough to bring him down at that point, but even still, I want to bring this one thing up about the Bills real quick. Defensively, they got into a trap that we've seen from them in years past. Pre Von Miller, pre the emergence of Gregory Rousseau, where they have to send the blitz because the front four couldn't win, and that's not the style of football they want to play defensively, obviously, and that has to change against Cincinnati if they want to win that game. Um, that front four has to win. With having to blitz Tremaine Edmonds and having to blitz guys from the secondary, it really opened things up for this Miami Dolphins offense to take advantage, and that's concerning for this Bills defense. They're a really good defense, but they're at their best when that front four can get pressure on the quarterback. They're not nearly as good when that quarterback just has all day in the pocket. So they're going to have to figure things out. But I think ultimately this might be good for them in the long run to get, challenged in a game they weren't supposed to be challenged in. I think with the situation with Damar Hamlin, they were kind of on like a emotional high, I guess, with all the good news that had been flowing from it, all the emotion they were able to play with. I think being brought down to earth a little bit in a game like this, I think that might help them. I think I trust Sean McDermott to have them prepared and fix a few things going in next week. And I think moving forward, I think they'll have a better showing in the next few games here.
Yeah, I do too. But ultimately, your $258 million quarterback has to rein in some of the mistakes that he was making. And I like Josh Allen. I think he will. But, man, I just cannot wait to break down that Cincinnati and Buffalo matchup. It's kind of ironic because that's the game that did not get played a couple weeks ago because of the Damar Hamlin situation. And now they're going to meet up again, except this time in Buffalo. So that should be interesting. But with that, if there's nothing else to be said, we can move on to what I thought was the story of the weekend, and that was Daniel Jones' performance on Sunday against the Vikings. A not great defense, admittedly so, by the Vikings, but I think Daniel Jones' performance was really the thing that stood out to me the most this weekend. I'll start with you on this one, though. Giants and Vikings, what'd you see and what made the difference in this game?
Well, Vikings defense is soft like Charmin. That was the only thing I put in the notes about the Vikings defense. But, you got to give credit to Daniel Jones. Of course, his ability to run the football and his ability to extend plays, what we haven't seen from him throughout his career. He always seemed a bit robotic in the pocket, always wanting to, play to the book so much that he never really got to show off his athletic ability outside the pocket. And we saw that a little bit in this game, and he's going to have to continue to do that. Another thing is this Giants offensive line played fantastic all game. They were able to, give Daniel Jones all the time in the world, and the wide receivers were getting open, and whenever they needed a play dialed up, they had Saquon Barkley, and he would always delivered. They didn't need to really put Saquon Barkley in a situation where he had to be a workhorse, which I think was ideal. But I did think it was interesting going into the game. The key we had for the Giants was don't fall into the trap of throwing the football too much, run the football against this Vikings team. And here we are today. They threw it all over the Vikings defense, and they just sprinkled in the run here and there. And Daniel Jones played so well to where it was the perfect game plan for them. So got to give credit to Brian Dable there, of course. And real quick on the fourth down for the Vikings to close the game, it was 4th and 8, I believe. I have a few things to say about that. I think that play encapsulates the value that a running quarterback can give you in a convert or go home situation like that, in a long down and distance. Giants went man coverage across the board, which means none of the defenders were looking at Kirk Cousins. No one was accounting for Kirk Cousins. There wasn't a spy or anything like that. And obviously the pressure was getting to Kirk Cousins all night, and there was pressure in his face with Dexter Lawrence on that play. And I think the criticisms of him not going down the field on that play to Justin Jefferson are valid, of course, but at the same time, having someone who can extend that play outside the pocket, or even run that play for 8 yards, is just extremely important. And that added value and that loss of value that the Vikings have with Kirk Cousins, and not that Kirk Cousins is bad, it just lowers the margin of error on those types of plays when the game is on the line.
That's a great point. Something I didn't really even think of. In today's NFL, that's what separates what you mentioned is what I think separates the elite, like the elite tier of quarterbacks from the next tier. And I think Kirk Cousins, with the consistency that we've seen year after year after year statistically, and then also his performance in some of these bigger games that has gotten better than what we've seen in past years. I think, that's, and of course, him getting with an offensive coach helps a lot. I mean, it's an offensive league nowadays, and 7 of the 8 remaining coaches in the playoffs are offensive coaches. The only one that is not would be Sean McDermott. So, but yeah, the running quarterback, the ability to extend plays. I mean, even like a Joe Burrow, who you don't really think of as a runner, could have made something happen outside the pocket and either thrown the ball downfield, found an open receiver, or possibly got those 8 yards. You don't have to be the fastest guy in the world. You don't have to be the most athletic guy in the world. When it's that man coverage concept that you mentioned, there's nobody to account for the quarterback. It's got to be either the front four that gets home, or it's really nothing after that. And the fact that the Vikings really don't have that, it's not that that's a bad thing. You can still win with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. And yeah, you probably should be throwing downfield on a 4th and 8 past the sticks to save your season instead of relying on a tight end to make someone miss. But at the same time, it can be looked at from both perspectives. To me, though, the story of the weekend was Daniel Jones. And look, back in April, the Giants had the chance to lock in Daniel Jones, pick up his 5th-year option, whatever. They didn't. They declined the 5th-year option, which most of the time tells you that they're not planning on, moving forward with Daniel Jones. But they said they had a plan to sort of evaluate him this year, and you saw the constant improvement. And a lot of this credit goes to Brian Dable and what he's been able to do. I think some of their playmakers had to step up, and they did. So credit to them as well. But if you look at, he delivered his best performance. They advanced to the divisional round to play the Eagles. That'll be a tough test. But 24 out of 35, 300 yards, 8.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and no turnovers. He ran the ball 17 times for 78 yards and a touchdown. And he picked up 7 first downs on the ground. And that's what we talked about, his ability to not only run, but run when it's needed and to just keep extending drives when he has to. And there's no one open down the field. And that's the difference. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but they did talk a lot about on the broadcast how he's more athletic than you think. And he's big. He's a bigger guy than he looks. So when he's running, he has the ability to he has that extra oomph that you don't think he has, that allows him to do what he does. And he's the first quarterback in NFL history with 300 or more passing yards, 2 or more passing touchdowns, and 70 or more rushing yards in a playoff game. So just a cool stat from the stat guy himself. But I think the most important thing is he's cut down on his turnovers and 0 mistakes on Sunday. He had 11 incompletions, but most of those were either drops by his receivers or smart throwaways. Nobody's open. I'm not going to force it and risk a turnover. And I think that's where he's grown the most. Obviously, people have talked about that at length, and that's the biggest thing. But also, last thing I'll say, the Giants moved the ball, I think, as well as I've seen them all year on Sunday. And some of that is Minnesota's not the best defensively, but also 26 first downs on 68 plays. So basically over a third of their plays, they were getting a first down. 430 yards, 6.3 yards per play. And most importantly, in the playoffs, when you have to be good on third and fourth down in those situational moments, the Giants went 9 of 15 on third and fourth downs combined. And all 4 touchdown drives were at least 75 yards. And when you're able to sustain those long touchdown drives, you keep a really good offense off the field in the Vikings, but you also give your defense rest, and you take time off the clock, and you control time of possession. And that's exactly what the Giants did. So, look, I don't know if they can beat the Eagles on the road, but if Daniel Jones continues this type of performance and they're not turning the ball over and they're just playing smart football, they're not going to be the easiest team to beat. They're no rollover anymore. I think they've shown that they deserve to be here.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
that's what it is. So
Yeah, and one last thing, Dexter Lawrence is an absolute unit
yeah,
in the middle of that defense. I couldn't move on without mentioning his name. He was dominant in that entire game. He was probably the best defensive lineman the entire weekend, you could argue. So, with that, let's move right along to the next game, which is Ravens at Bengals. AFC North playoff football, as you would expect, physical as ever. I'll let you start it off.
well, boy, can I appreciate some AFC North football. I don't particularly like either of these teams, but I respect both of them. And look, this was, Tyler Huntley doing what he could to win the game. I thought the Ravens did some really good things, both offensively and defensively. But this game really flipped on one play, and that was the dive by Tyler Huntley over the line. The ball gets stripped, and Hubbard takes it back for a touchdown. That's really what this game came down to. We can argue all day about what Tyler Huntley should have done, what he could have done to not fumble and potentially change this game and keep the ball, at least get a field goal out of that possession. But to me, I think from a Bengals perspective, this was a defense that had, as opposed to last year, given the Bengals some problems in their previous 2 regular season meetings. I mean, Baltimore really knows how to play this Cincinnati offense. And I think you saw them be able to create some pressure. We know that Baltimore is an aggressive defense, even without Wink Martindale. And with the new offensive lineman playing for Cincinnati, they were able to do some really good things defensively. Baltimore was able to run the ball, draw up some smart plays for Tyler Huntley, some easy throws. But at the end of the day, it was one play that flipped the game. And that play was pretty disastrous from a Baltimore perspective. But I think from a Cincinnati perspective, I think it could be a good thing that you were challenged this early in a game that I really didn't expect to be this close. I'll be honest with you. So I think you take it as it is. You made the play when you had to, and you move on to this week against Buffalo. But man, AFC North football is not the prettiest, but I think there's something to be said for that physical style football in January, and one or two plays typically swing these rivalry games in the AFC North. And
Yep.
if there's anyone who knows that, it's me. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, the Bengals on offense, I think the offensive line really struggled, but I think Joe Burrow has really grown in the fact that he's balancing getting the ball out quickly with some of the play extension stuff he does. I think finding that balance really helped the Bengals move the ball more consistently without taking as many sacks as, say, some playoff games last year. For example, the Tennessee game where he took 9 sacks. He was getting the ball out quick. They were mostly efficient. But the one problem was they just couldn't run the football, which might be an issue moving forward. But I think ultimately this is the toughest defensive team they're going to face, just matchup wise. I think, you could argue that the Bills defense is better overall, or that the Chiefs defense is slightly better overall, but the Ravens are 100% the toughest matchup they'll face in the AFC, in my opinion. So I think they're in good shape moving forward. The hope is that, you get past the Bills and maybe get one of your offensive tackles back, or just someone on that offensive line to reinforce things. But you got to get past the Bills first, and that's no easy task.
And people forget, like, in the AFC North or in any division really, and I think we saw it, over the course of the week, and especially with the Dolphins playing the Bills with a lesser quarterback or a tough quarterback situation. That familiarity, and especially in Baltimore's case and Cincinnati's case, not only when you're playing that team for a third time, but you're playing them for the second time in 2 weeks, and it's really hard to go out and beat them. Not only 2 times in a season, but 2 times in 2 weeks. So I think credit where credit is due, even though there was really one play that really swung the game. So, but I'm definitely looking forward to next week's matchup. So with that, we'll if there's nothing else to be said, we'll wrap it up with
just one other thing. It's just John Harbaugh's clock management to close the game was really baffling. I hadn't seen that type of clock management blunder from Harbaugh before. That was really mesmerizing, just how awful that was. It was like he thought the timeouts transfer into next year. Like, what are you doing, dude? Like, just call a timeout. But anyways, we can move right along. Just had to make that point.
Yeah, so with that, the last game was played last night, Monday Night Football, Dallas and Tampa Bay. You're the Cowboys fan, so I'll let you start off with this one, unless you want me to give my quick take first.
I can start. That's fine. Okay. What I'll say is this was a classic case of the overreaction Mondays for me. I actually picked the Bucks to win this game despite what the overall body of work was for both of these teams. And I think it was kind of just natural pessimism and kind of fear of facing the GOAT. And I guess that's fair, but I think I didn't take into account how much Tampa Bay struggles to run the football, and that's that's where the Cowboys defense struggles the most is defending the run. And with that factor taken out, they can pin their ears back and rush the passer as much as they want. And when you can do that with Micah Parsons and the guys we have on our team, then there's no wonder Tom Brady was under that much pressure. It's just inevitable at that point. Um, Offensively for the Cowboys, I like the fact that Dak was willing to run the football more. Some of his scrambling ability we hadn't seen in the past couple of years since that ankle injury. It was good to see him running a bit more, getting those free yards. I think that really kept the offense moving and flowing, kept us out of those 3rd and 10s that could really stop momentum. And I don't really know what to say about the Brett Maher thing. I just hope he got it out of his system. It didn't end up mattering, which is all that matters. I'm really glad about that. But man, we're gonna need him to make some kicks against San Francisco next week. So he needs to get it together, man. But that's all I really have to say. I just think the Bucks have been a bad football team all year, and I mean, what do you know? They were a bad football team, and it was a fitting way to end their season. It was putrid all year.
Yeah, now the story for like the next month or two is going to be, what is Tom Brady going to do? What is Tom Brady going to do? What is Tom Brady going to do?
Yeah.
So just get ready for that to be one of the dominating stories until he makes a decision. It's going to get annoying, trust me. But we all know that we've already been through one saga of, oh, I'm retiring. We did it. We actually did. It's funny. We actually did like a honorary tribute episode to Tom Brady once he announced his retirement. And then 60 days later, he announced that he wasn't retiring. So who knows? We might have to do another one of those this offseason.
Oh
Or maybe
God.
we'll wait. Maybe we'll wait until it's actually official to give him a little round of applause for what a career he's had.
Yeah, we're waiting until September to make that episode. I don't care. Dude, I'm not taking any chances, man.
But anywho, I think you're exactly right. This Buccaneers football team, I think, to be honest with you, sometimes I think like, and I mean, the NFL playoffs are what they are. They're great. They give us great games. The product on the field is mostly fantastic. And it gets high ratings, so there's really no reason to change it. But sometimes I think about like, you know, if you're under 500 and you win your division because it's just, quite frankly, a bad division, do you really deserve to be in the playoffs? I know that's what the NFL playoff structure allows, and that those are the rules. But sometimes I think, like, what if it was the Lions, who I think were probably at the end of the day a little more deserving to be in this situation than the Buccaneers were? Or what if it's, I don't know, I know they're in different conferences, but a team like the New York Jets or the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots, teams that, particularly the Steelers, in my opinion, that played well down the stretch, won 7 of the last 9 games. I just think about those hypotheticals sometimes when I see these teams that probably really don't, not that they don't deserve to be there. They won the games they had to get into the playoffs, but probably at the end of the day weren't really suited to compete for a Super Bowl. And look, at the end of the day, you got Ryan Jensen back on your offensive line. That helped to a degree, but you still didn't have much success running the football. I think it's time to move off Leonard Fournette, potentially draft or get another running back in there for some depth. Figure out your offensive line, what that situation is going to look like next year. And of course, you want to figure out what's going to happen with Brady. To be honest with you, and we've said it over and over and over again on the podcast. We're not going to doubt Tom Brady, but I think his best days are probably at this point behind him. If he thinks he's going to compete for a Super Bowl with this Buccaneers roster as currently constructed, with a little older, I'm not sure what to tell him other than it's probably not going to be the case. And look, I think the Cowboys did what they had to do. Dak was, for the most part, really good. And I think that's really good to see. If you're a Cowboys fan, you're going to need that sort of performance next week. I believe he was turnover free. I actually turned the game off once it was like 31-6. So I don't know much of what happened after that. But yeah, I think that's good to see. And you just were a better football team all around. Particularly that pass rush, which I think I mentioned in our preview episode, really did its job in pressuring Brady, making him feel uncomfortable. And you somehow forced Brady into, I think, his first red zone turnover in the I don't know if it's his career in the playoffs or what the stat was, but he doesn't turn the ball over in the red zone a lot. And you guys got him to make a mistake. So I think it was just about the defense, especially that front seven, just dominating up front. Tampa Bay's inability to run the football. And then, quite frankly, I think even though I still think you have good playmakers on the outside, capable guys on the outside, I think you're lacking a little bit of that speed component in this Tampa Bay offense. And we'll see what happens. It'll be an interesting offseason in Tampa Bay, to say the least. But now if you're Dallas, you look forward to a much tougher opponent in the San Francisco 49ers next week.
Yeah, I think it was good to see Dak play his best in a playoff game. That's one of the things we've been waiting to see. A lot of games in the playoffs where we had 10 penalties or just something goes wrong always. And I've kind of immune myself to see it every time as a Cowboys fan. And it was nice to just see a game where we actually played how we were supposed to play. So if we play like that, then we'll have a shot against the Niners. It won't be we won't be the favorites, but we'll have a shot.
Exactly. Is there any other final thoughts, just overall, for Wildcard weekend as we lead into divisional weekend, or do you want to wrap this thing up?
Well, one thing I'll say is, it's tough to predict these games, man. That was the overarching factor that I saw. Like I actually had a parlay where I had the Bills covering the spread as the last leg that I needed, and obviously that didn't turn out to be the case. And picking these games is it's a coin flip sometimes, especially against the spread. So going into the divisional round, we can start to dive deeper into these games now that there's less games, and it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, we should have an episode coming out. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday, but whatever the case may be, we'll break down all 4 divisional games in depth. I hope to do some prep for that episode, and then we're going to talk about the coaching carousel. It might be the college coaching carousel, it might be the NFL, or it might be a combination of the two. I think in some ways they're sort of interconnected because some of the candidates from college could be candidates for head coaching jobs in the NFL and vice versa. So, most of the big hires in college football have already happened, so we can talk about those too. But with that being said, I think that'll wrap it up for this wildcard recap. Maybe we can do another. I thought this episode went really well, so maybe we can do another episode like this next week when the divisional round is over and so forth. But with that being said, subscribe to our channel. Be on the lookout for future content. And if you don't have anything else to say, Emmy,
Nothing else.
just like the Seahawks, the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Vikings, the Ravens, and the Buccaneers, just like their seasons, we are going, gone. Peace out.
Peace out. To the Shadow Realm we go.